The alien's claws were already through Lieutenant Danny Morrison's chest plate when he grabbed its throat and squeezed until the exoskeleton cracked. Blood, his own and the creature's purple ichor, sprayed across the corridor as he threw the corpse aside and kept running. Behind him, the rest of Gamma Squad fired in controlled bursts, their weapons lighting up the darkness of the Krell warship's interior like a lightning storm. "Reach in 30 seconds, Corporal Lisa Hayes shouted over the comm, her voice steady despite the chaos. She had the demolition pack strapped to her back, enough explosive to crack this ship open like an egg. Danny could see the bulkhead ahead, massive and sealed, the last barrier between them and the ship's reactor core. 20 meters. 15. The crowd were pouring out of side passages now, their chittering war cries echoing off metal walls. Private Kevin Ortiz took one down with a headshot that painted the ceiling with alien brain matter. Sergeant Amy Chen threw a grenade that turned 6 more into smoking fragments. "Set the charge," Danny ordered as Lisa dropped to her knees by the door. Her hands moved with practiced precision, placing the shaped explosives exactly where they needed to be. The rest of the squad formed a defensive perimeter, their rifles barking in steady rhythm. The Krell kept coming. They always kept coming. Danny's helmet display showed his vital signs going haywire. The claw had punctured his lung. He could feel the blood filling his chest cavity, each breath a little harder than the last. Didn't matter. Nothing mattered except completing the mission. "Charges set," Lisa announced. "Timer at 10 seconds on your mark." "Do it," Danny said. The explosion turned the bulkhead into shrapnel. The squad pushed through before the smoke cleared, weapons up, firing at anything that moved. The reactor room was enormous. A cathedral of alien technology that hummed with power enough to glass a planet. 3 Krell engineers died before they could reach their stations. The rest scattered. "Planted on the core," Danny ordered, his voice wet with blood. Lisa was already moving, her second pack of explosives ready. This one was different. This one was nuclear. They had stolen it from the Krell 3 months ago after the Battle of New Harmony, where humanity lost 2 million soldiers in a single day. The aliens had thought humans would break after that. They thought wrong. 2 minutes to detonation, Lisa said, arming the device. "We need to move." But Danny knew the math. The extraction point was 4 minutes away at a full sprint. They had come here to die. They had always been coming here to die. "Squad, listen up," he said, his vision starting to blur. "You've got 120 seconds to get to the escape pods. I'll hold this position." "Sir, you can't," Kevin started. "That's an order, Private." They hesitated for exactly 2 seconds. Then they ran. Danny watched them go, pride swelling in his damaged chest. Lisa looked back once, her eyes meeting his through their helmet visors. He nodded. She turned away. The Krell came in force 30 seconds later, a wave of claws and teeth and alien fury. Danny met them with the last magazine in his rifle. Each shot a small prayer to whatever gods watched over soldiers who knew they were already dead. Part 2. The USS Valkyrie's bridge erupted in chaos when the Krell flagship's reactor went critical. Captain Richard Hayes gripped his command chair as the view screen showed a miniature sun blooming in the darkness of space, consuming the alien vessel and taking 17 nearby Krell destroyers. Gamma Squad signal lost, the communications officer reported, her voice tight. No survivors. Richard had known Danny Morrison for 8 years. They had served together on Europa Station before the war, back when humanity still believed it was alone in the universe. Now Danny was atoms scattered across the void, along with 4 other soldiers who had volunteered for a mission everyone knew was suicide. "All ships advance," Richard ordered. The flagships down, push through their line. The human fleet surged forward, 30 vessels against the Krell's remaining 70. The numbers didn't favor them. The numbers never favored them. But Gamma Squad had just vaporized the enemy's command and control, and in the 3 seconds of confusion that followed, humanity struck like a hammer. The Valkyrie's railguns fired, accelerating tungsten slugs to a fraction of light speed. They punched through Krell shields like they weren't even there, coring ships from bow to stern. Fighter wings launched from the carrier Defiance, their pilots screaming war cries as they dove into the enemy formation. Lieutenant Commander Patricia Moore coordinated the fleet's movements from her tactical station, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. She had been a mathematics professor before the war, teaching calculus to bored undergraduates. Now she calculated death trajectories and firing solutions, turning abstract numbers into very concrete corpses.
Enemy cruiser at Mark 73 is launching boarding torpedoes, she announced.
Intercept pattern Alpha. Point defense batteries lit up space with tracer fire, but 3 torpedoes made it through. They slammed into the Valkyrie's port side, their magnetic clamps locking onto the hull before drilling through. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Boarding parties on decks 9, 12, and 15. Security Chief Commander Frank Palmer reported. He was already moving, his sidearm drawn, shouting orders to the Marine detachments stationed throughout the vessel. All hands repel boarders. The Krell came through the breaches like a flood of nightmares. They were 7 feet tall, covered in natural armor plates, with 4 arms that ended in razor-sharp claws. Their faces were all mandibles and compound eyes, insectoid and utterly alien. They had been the dominant species in this sector of the galaxy for 3,000 years. They had never encountered humans before. Private Jake Sullivan met the first wave on Deck 9 with a flamethrower. The confined space of the ship's corridor became an inferno, alien screams mixing with the roar of burning promethium. When his fuel tank ran dry, he switched to his rifle, firing point blank into the mass of chittering bodies. On Deck 12, Corporal Nina Ross used the low gravity of the damaged section to her advantage, launching herself off walls and ceiling, her knife finding the weak points in Krell armor with surgical precision. She moved like a dancer, graceful and deadly, leaving a trail of purple blood in her wake. Deck 15 was where they made their stand. Commander Palmer set up a kill zone at the intersection of 3 corridors, positioning his Marines with overlapping fields of fire. When the Krell rushed them, they ran straight into a wall of lead that tore them to pieces. "Bridge, this is Palmer," the commander said, breathing hard. "Boarders neutralized, 13 casualties, 7 KIA." "Acknowledged," Richard replied. On the view screen, the battle was turning. The Krell formation had collapsed without their flagship's coordination. Human ships were picking them apart, exploiting every gap, every moment of confusion. But the enemy wasn't done. 3 Krell dreadnoughts broke from the main engagement, their massive engines glowing as they accelerated toward Earth's orbital defense grid. Each one carried enough firepower to crack a continent. "They're going for the planet," Patricia said, her voice hollow. Richard made the calculation in an instant. The defense grid could handle maybe 1 dreadnought, possibly 2 if they got lucky. 3 would get through. 3 would kill billions. "All ships," he ordered, "intercept course, ram speed." The bridge went silent. Every officer understood what he was asking. The Valkyrie and her sister ships didn't have the firepower to stop 3 dreadnoughts at range. But mass times velocity was a universal constant, and a warship traveling at 0.7 light speed was a kinetic weapon nothing could withstand. "Sir," Patricia said quietly, "the escape pods won't make it far enough before the dreadnoughts reach firing range," Richard finished. "Plot the course." The Valkyrie turned, her engines screaming as they pushed past safety limits. Around them, 15 other ships did the same, captains who had families waiting on Earth. Officers who had survived 100 battles, engineers who had kept their vessels running through impossible odds. All of them aimed their ships at the enemy and pushed their throttles to maximum. The Krell must have realized what was happening. The dreadnoughts opened fire, their main batteries lancing out with beams of superheated plasma. The destroyer Courageous took a direct hit and simply ceased to exist, vaporized in an instant. The cruiser Steadfast lost her entire port side but kept coming, trailing atmosphere and debris. 30 seconds to impact, Patricia reported. Her hands were steady on the controls. "It's been an honor, Captain." "The honor was mine," Richard said. The first human ship hit at 73% light speed. The relativistic impact released energy equivalent to a gigaton nuclear weapon, erasing the dreadnought from existence, and taking 2 nearby Krell frigates with it. The second ship struck milliseconds later. Then the third. The Valkyrie hit last, her bow crumpling against the dreadnought's shields in the instant before physics turned both vessels into an expanding cloud of plasma. Richard Hayes had just enough time to see Earth on the view screen, blue and green and perfect, before everything became light. Part 3. Admiral Helen Carter watched the battle from Earth's orbital command center. Her hands clenched so tight her knuckles had gone white. 16 ships had just sacrificed themselves to save the planet. 16 crews gone in flashes of light that briefly outshone the sun. The remaining Krell fleet was breaking off, retreating toward the jump point at the system's edge. Humanity's surviving ships pursued, harrying them every kilometer of the way. It was a victory, but victories didn't bring back the dead. "Ma'am," her aide said softly, "casualty reports are coming in." Helen didn't want to look. She had sent those ships into battle. She had approved the defense plan, positioned the fleet, made the calls that determined who lived and who died. The weight of it sat on her shoulders like a physical thing. 43,000 confirmed dead, another 12,000 missing, presumed KIA. 55,000 lives. 55,000 people who had woken up this morning thinking they might see tomorrow. Helen had known most of the ship captains personally. She had attended Richard Hayes' wedding, had been at the hospital when his daughter was born. Now she would have to tell his wife that he wasn't coming home. Schedule a fleet-wide memorial for... She started, then stopped. The sensor display was showing something impossible. What is that? A massive energy signature had appeared at the edge of the system, right where the Krell fleet was headed. It wasn't a ship. It was too big to be a ship. The readings suggested something the size of a small moon, but the energy output was off the scale. "Unknown contact," the sensor officer reported, his voice rising in pitch. "Configuration doesn't match any known vessel type. Power signature is, ma'am, it's generating more energy than our entire fleet combined." On the main display, the thing became visible. It was crystalline, all sharp angles and impossible geometry, glowing with internal light that hurt to look at directly. The Krell fleet was scattering, breaking formation, trying to get away from it. They didn't make it. Beams of pure white light lanced out from the crystal structure, each one touching a Krell ship. There was no explosion, no dramatic fireball. The vessels simply stopped, frozen in space, as if time itself had paused around them. Within seconds, the entire retreating fleet hung motionless against the stars. "Get me a comm channel," Helen ordered. "All frequencies." Static filled the bridge speakers for a moment, then cleared. A voice spoke, flat and emotionless, like someone reading from a script they didn't care about. "Humanity, you have been evaluated. The Krell brought you to our attention through their actions in your space. We have observed your species' response to existential threat. We find your methodology acceptable." "Who are you?" Helen demanded. "We are the architects. We have maintained galactic order for 7 million years. The Krell violated protocol by initiating unprovoked aggression against a developing species. This violation has been corrected." The frozen Krell ships began to compress, folding in on themselves like paper crushed in an invisible fist. Metal screamed silently in vacuum as the vessels were reduced to dense spheres of matter, each one small enough to hold in a hand. Then those spheres winked out of existence, erased as if they had never been. "The Krell supremacy no longer exists," the architect's voice continued. "Their 14 colony worlds have been sterilized. Their homeworld has been relocated to the galactic core. Their species will not trouble you again." Helen felt her stomach drop. The architects had just committed genocide on a scale that made humanity's worst atrocities look like playground scuffles. Billions of Krell, civilians and soldiers alike, snuffed out in moments. "We didn't ask for that," she said, her voice shaking. "We were defending ourselves, but we never wanted... Your wants are irrelevant. The Krell threatened you because they believed you were weak. They believed all species who had not achieved faster-than-light travel were inferior, worthy only of conquest or extinction. They were wrong. You fought them with inferior technology, inferior numbers, and inferior strategic position, yet you won. We lost 55,000 people today alone," Helen said. We've lost 12 million since the war started. How is that winning? The Krell have lost everything. You have lost a fraction of your population. In war, survival is victory. One of the human ships, the destroyer Relentless, was moving toward the Architect structure. Her captain, a young woman named Stephanie Grant, was on an open channel. Unknown vessel, this is Captain Grant of the Relentless. If you're here to threaten Earth, you'll have to go through us first. Helen almost smiled despite everything. That was humanity in a nutshell. Faced with something impossibly powerful, something that had just casually destroyed an entire species, and their first instinct was to stand between it and home. Captain Grant, the Architect said, stand down. We are not your enemy. We are your evaluators. Every species that achieves space travel is tested. Some pass. Most do not. The Krell were your test. Your performance was unexpected. Unexpected how? Helen asked. Most species fight to survive. You fight to win. Most species defend their territory. You destroyed the enemy flagship behind their own lines. Most species value individual life above mission success. You ram dreadnoughts with crude vessels when targeting computers would suffice. You are inefficient, wasteful, and tactically unsound. Yet you achieve victory through sheer refusal to accept defeat. The Architect structure pulsed with light. When it faded, data package appeared in Earth's communication network, terabytes of information flooding into every connected system simultaneously. This is everything, the voice said. Faster than light travel. 0-point energy extraction. Quantum computing. Nanotechnology, medical science that will extend your lifespans by centuries. We gift this to species who pass evaluation. Use it wisely. Wait, Helen said. Why? What do you get out of this? We maintain order. Chaos is inefficient. Species like the Krell create chaos. Species like humanity create interest. We will be watching. Do not disappoint us. The crystal structure folded in on itself and vanished, leaving no trace that it ever existed except for the silent void where the Krell fleet had been. Helen stared at the empty space on the display, her mind racing. They had won, not just the battle, but the war. The Krell were gone, erased from existence by being so powerful they made both humans and aliens look like children playing with sticks, and those beings thought humanity was interesting. Part 4. Dr. Gregory Adams stood in his laboratory staring at the holographic display that showed the Architect's gift unfolding across a dozen different scientific disciplines. Around him, his team of researchers moved with frantic energy, their faces lit with wonder and terror in equal measure. This is impossible, muttered Dr. Claire Jensen, her fingers tracing through a three-dimensional model of a faster-than-light drive. The math works. It actually works. But the energy requirements alone would... The 0-point extraction system handles that, Gregory interrupted, pulling up another section of the data. Look, they've solved the vacuum catastrophe. They're pulling energy directly from quantum fluctuations in space-time. Do you understand what we're looking at? Claire's voice rose. This isn't just advanced technology. This is a complete rewrite of everything we thought we knew about physics. Einstein's equations are just approximations. Quantum mechanics is incomplete. Everything we've built our understanding on is wrong. Not wrong, Gregory said. Limited. We were looking at shadows on the wall of Plato's cave, and the Architects just dragged us outside. The implications were staggering. Humanity had been fighting the Krell with chemical rockets and nuclear weapons, technology barely more advanced than what they had developed in the 20th century. The Architects had handed them the keys to the galaxy, but Gregory couldn't shake the feeling that there was a catch. His terminal chimed with an incoming call. Admiral Carter's face appeared on the screen, looking 10 years older than she had this morning.
Dr. Adams, I need your assessment.
Is this technology safe to implement? Gregory hesitated. Safe was a relative term when you were talking about engines that tore holes in space-time and reactors that pulled energy from the quantum foam underlying reality. Define safe, Admiral. Will it kill us all if we turn it on? Probably not immediately, Gregory said. But Admiral, we need to talk about what else is in this data package. There are sections that aren't technology. There are historical records. The architects have been watching the galaxy for 7 million years, and they've evaluated thousands of species. How many passed? Helen asked. Gregory pulled up the relevant file. The number made his hands shake. 47, including us, 47 species have passed evaluation in 7 million years. Do you want to know what happened to the others? Helen's face was grim. Tell me. Most were destroyed by their evaluators, species that initiated unprovoked aggression against others, like the Krell did to us. But some, Gregory scrolled through the records, some passed the combat evaluation but failed the aftermath. They got the technology and they destroyed themselves with it. How? Different ways. One species developed relativistic weapons and blew up their home star in a civil war. Another created artificial intelligence that decided organic life was inefficient and needed to be corrected. 3 separate species engineered biological weapons that got out of control. The architects just watched and recorded it all. Helen was silent for a long moment. They're testing us again. This technology is the second test. That's my assessment. They want to see if we're smart enough to use what they've given us without annihilating ourselves. Recommendations? Gregory looked at his team, all of them brilliant minds who had dedicated their lives to pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. They had just been handed answers to questions humanity had been asking for centuries. The temptation to rush forward to build everything at once was overwhelming. Slow implementation, he said finally. We start with the medical technology. Extend lifespans, cure diseases, improve quality of life. Then we move to energy production and environmental restoration. The weapons and the starships come last only after we've proven we can handle the rest without turning into monsters. The government won't like that, Helen said. Half of Congress is already demanding we build a fleet of FTL warships to secure our borders. Then half of Congress is going to get us all killed. Admiral, the architects eliminated the Krell because they were aggressive expansionists. If we immediately weaponize their gift and start claiming territory across the galaxy, what do you think the architects will do to us? The question hung in the air between them. Meanwhile, in a small apartment in Seattle, former Marine Corporal Ryan Mitchell was having a very different conversation with the architect's gift. He had been one of the ground troops who fought the Krell on New Harmony, had watched his entire platoon die in the first 5 minutes of combat. The experience had left him with PTSD so severe he could barely leave his house. But buried in the medical data was a neural template for treating combat trauma, a way to process and integrate traumatic memories without losing them. Ryan had downloaded it on impulse, desperate for anything that might help him sleep without nightmares. The treatment worked. For the first time in 3 years, Ryan's hands weren't shaking. His mind was clear. He could think about New Harmony without feeling like he was drowning. He could also think about what humanity had become. The architect's historical records were available to anyone who wanted to read them. Ryan had spent the last 6 hours going through the files, seeing the pattern repeat across millennia and species. Evaluation, gift, self-destruction. 46 species before humanity. 46 chances to get it right. Only 12 of them still existed, scattered across the galaxy, struggling to maintain civilizations built on technology they barely understood. The other 34 were footnotes in the architect's database. Extinct. Failures. Ryan pulled up the comm system and started making calls. He knew people, veterans from the war, engineers, scientists, teachers, ordinary citizens who had watched the battle from Earth and felt that same mixture of pride and horror. People who understood that humanity stood at a crossroads. "We need to talk," he said when the first person answered, "about what happens next, about what kind of species we want to be." Part 5. 6 months after the architect's gift, Earth had changed in ways both visible and subtle. The skyline of every major city now included construction projects that defied conventional architecture, buildings grown from smart materials rather than built with traditional methods. Disease rates had plummeted as the new medical technology spread across the globe. Average life expectancy had jumped to 200 years, though no one alive had experienced those extra decades yet. But the real changes were happening in orbit. The shipyards above Luna worked around the clock, constructing vessels unlike anything humanity had built before. They weren't weapons platforms disguised as exploration ships. They were actual exploration ships designed to carry humans to the stars and bring back knowledge rather than territory. Captain Jennifer Cole stood on the bridge of the Horizon, humanity's first faster-than-light vessel. She was 32 years old, had degrees in astrophysics and xenobiology, and had never fired a weapon in anger. That was intentional. The Horizon wasn't a warship. It carried no missiles, no railguns, no weapons of any kind. It carried scientists, diplomats, and hope. Final systems check complete, her first officer, Commander Marcus Webb, reported. All green across the board. We're ready for the jump. Jennifer looked at her crew, 57 people from 23 different countries, chosen not for their combat skills but for their curiosity, their compassion, their ability to see beyond human prejudices. If they were going to meet other species out there among the stars, they needed to do better than the Krell had done. They needed to do better than humanity had often done to itself. Engineering initiate FTL sequence, Jennifer ordered. The ship hummed with power as the faster-than-light drive engaged. Space twisted around the horizon, and suddenly Earth was gone, replaced by a star system 97 light-years away. The journey that would have taken centuries with conventional drives had lasted 3 seconds. "We did it," someone whispered. "No," Jennifer said. "We started. The rest comes now." The system they had jumped to was one flagged in the architect's database as having a developing civilization. Pre-industrial, no spaceflight, no idea they weren't alone in the universe. First contact protocols required observation only, no interference. Jennifer had other ideas. "Launch sensor drones," she ordered. "Full spectrum scan. I want to know everything about this civilization before we make any decisions." The drones returned data over the following days. The species was mammalian, roughly analogous to Earth's dolphins in terms of intelligence, living in vast ocean cities on a world that was 90% water. They had art, music, mathematics, philosophy. They were also dying. Their sun was entering an active phase, increasing radiation output by 3% over the next century. Not enough to boil their oceans, but enough to disrupt their ecosystem and trigger a mass extinction. They had no way to stop it. No way to even understand what was happening. "We can fix this," Marcus said, pulling up schematics. "Orbital solar shields. The technology is simple compared to what we have now. We could build them in a month." "And violate first contact protocols," Jennifer replied. The architects were clear. Developing species are off limits until they achieve space travel on their own. "The architects can go to hell," said Dr. Karen Phillips, the ship's xenobiologist. "We have the power to save billions of lives. What kind of monsters would we be if we just watched them die?" Jennifer looked at her crew. She saw the same conflict on every face. The rules said, "Don't interfere." Compassion said, "Save them." What kind of species did humanity want to be? She made her choice. "We build the shields, but we do it quietly. Make them look like natural phenomena. Metallic asteroid fragments that drifted into stable orbit, something their scientists can observe but won't trace back to outside intervention. We save them without them knowing we were here." "The architects will know," Marcus said. "We're probably being watched right now." "Let them watch. Let them see what humanity does when we have power. We don't destroy. We help." The Horizon spent 3 weeks in the system using fabricators to construct reflective panels that would orbit the planet and diffuse the excess radiation. They placed them carefully, made them look natural, erased every trace of their presence. The dolphin analogs never knew how close they had come to extinction, never knew that aliens had saved them. That was fine. Jennifer didn't need gratitude. She needed to know that humanity could have power without abusing it. Back on Earth, Ryan Mitchell's movement had grown. What started as informal gatherings of veterans and concerned citizens had evolved into a global network dedicated to ethical use of the architect's technology. They called themselves the Stewards, and their message was simple. Humanity had been given a tremendous gift, and the only way to honor it was to use it wisely. Not everyone agreed. There were factions demanding immediate military expansion, groups that wanted to claim territory before other species did, politicians who saw the new technology as a path to dominance rather than development. Admiral Helen Carter found herself mediating between these extremes, trying to chart a course that would keep humanity from destroying itself. She had aged noticeably in 6 months, the weight of decisions pressing down on her. "We've detected 3 other species within 50 light-years," she said during a security briefing. 2 are pre-FTL, like us before the Architect's Gift. 1 is post-FTL but doesn't seem interested in expansion. How do we approach them? "Carefully," said General Paul Anderson, chief of the newly formed Space Defense Force. "We don't know their intentions. Until we do, we maintain defensive readiness." Defensive readiness means building weapons, Ryan said. He had been invited to these meetings as a civilian advisor representing the stewards. "And the moment we start building weapons, we signal to the galaxy that we're willing to use force." "The galaxy already knows we're willing to use force," Paul shot back. "We rammed dreadnoughts with crude ships." That story is probably spreading across every species that heard about the Krell War. "Good," Helen said quietly. "Let them know we fight when we have to, but let them also see what we do when we don't have to fight." The Horizons mission was a success. Captain Cole saved an entire species without firing a shot. That's the story I want spreading across the galaxy. The debate continued for hours, but a consensus was emerging. Humanity would explore, would reach out to other species, would build defenses but not weapons of conquest. It wasn't a perfect solution. There would be mistakes, setbacks, disasters that no one could predict. But for the first time in human history, they were making these choices while looking outward rather than inward, thinking in terms of centuries rather than election cycles. 3 months later, the architects returned, not with ships or structures, but with a simple message broadcast across every human communication system. "Humanity, you have completed secondary evaluation. 47 species have received our gift. 46 came before you. Of those, 12 survive. You are now the 13th. We will be watching. We will always be watching." Helen read the message from her office, looking out the window at Earth below. The planet looked the same as always, blue and green and beautiful. But everything had changed. Humanity had passed the test. Both tests, they had fought when they needed to fight, had shown mercy when they could have shown cruelty, had chosen to help rather than conquer. They weren't perfect, they would make mistakes, but they were trying to be better than they had been. And in a galaxy that had seen civilizations rise and fall for millions of years, maybe that was enough. Maybe that was what it meant to be human. Not the strongest, not the smartest, not the most advanced, but stubborn enough to survive, compassionate enough to care, and crazy enough to keep trying even when the odds seemed impossible. Helen opened a new file and began writing orders for the next phase of exploration. There were stars to visit, species to meet, questions to answer. The war with the Krell was over, but humanity's story was just beginning. Somewhere in the depths of space, the architects observed and recorded. Another species had joined the ranks of those who passed evaluation. Another thread added to the tapestry of galactic civilization. And on Earth, in 1,000 cities and 1,000,000 homes, people looked up at the stars and dreamed of what came next.